You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. In this show, we go beyond the campfire stories to bring you firsthand encounters from people who say they've seen something impossible, from backwoods trails and remote mountain haulers to quiet farms and crowded highways. The stories come from everywhere, and each one leaves us with more questions than answers. These are the voices of the people who've lived it, so settle in, because today you'll hear another account that just might change the way you see the woods forever. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Miguel today. Miguel is an individual I got connected to. He's from out there in the Spokane, Washington area. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. We were talking before the show started, and already stuff was getting thrown out that was very intense. So I am excited to have Miguel on the show. Welcome, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. It's been, like we chatted earlier, it seems like my life has kind of led up to this point, and I'm super excited to let anybody know anything they'd like to about me, and some craziness has happened in my time. And like I said, I'm an open book, and I'm just excited to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So how far back do we need to go for your story, Miguel? It sounds like there's a lot of stuff intertwined here, and not just only Bigfoot related.
Well, to be honest with you, to start that righteously, just a quick tidbit, because I could just blow time just talking about just stuff leading up to this point, I guess, would be really, as far as I could tell, when I kind of became conscious of myself as a young guy, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years old, sitting down in a high chair eating, looking down at myself, noticing my legs and arms, and I thought to myself, dang, I'm a baby again. I think I've been reincarnated. I feel like that. My parents and everybody around me has always thought that I was a little special in the way of just being sensed in different life aspects and whatnot. And it just kind of started there. To be honest, I didn't get along with my dad. I'm 54 now. And when I was about 35, I went to him and I apologized that I was such a bullheaded kid and that we kind of got into it a little bit. Maybe typical father-son arguments, but I kind of, I guess, in a way, came clean to my dad, because I realized the reason why I treated him the way I did is because, like I said, when I was conscious, noticing I was a baby again, my dumb mind thought, well, he's not even my dad. Why do I got to listen to him? Well, it sounds crazy, but that's the way I felt for a long time growing up.
Wow. So you never really thought of him as your father. Is that something that came to light later, or? Well,
it didn't take long for me to realize that that I was remembering, past life, I guess some would call it, or something. I just really felt frustrated that I was a baby again, and that's the key word to this, again. Looking down at my arms and legs, I was like, what's going on here? And it was just this weird, it was like one of my first conscious memories of myself, I guess.
Did you also have other interesting things happen during your upbringing? You've already mentioned that it sounds like, you can remember a past life. Were there other things that would happen that were out of the ordinary for a young kid?
Sure. I'm a twin, and my brother and I, and, through time I've kind of not really researched it as much as just kind of seen and heard shows and whatnot through the years, that sometimes twin babies have their own language. And my brother and I definitely had that going on, and I can kind of still remember a lot of that. And it kind of went even into one of my daughters, where my wife and I were kind of worried because my youngest, she wasn't speaking very soon like my other daughter was. And it went on to maybe 4, almost 5 years old, and we thought, oh wow, I wonder if she might be on the spectrum or something. And she wasn't at all. She was just so observant. So even leading up to that time, I was a kid that was just super wanted to know all kinds of information. And so I've forgotten a little bit, but I learned sign language just kind of for fun. And I was teaching my daughter sign language, and she was communicating with me, no problem. And then we found out she was just listening all the time and was just super quiet. She just didn't want to talk. But when she decided to come out of her shell, we can't shut her up. She's on her way. Maybe, I don't know what field she's going to be doing, but she's taking classes and whatnot, you know, in the medical field. I don't know if she's going to go far as being a doctor, but, you know, she speaks 2 languages and is smart as a whip.
That is fascinating. You never know what's in the mind of a child until one day, man, they just start doing stuff. I know exactly what that's like. But, you know, Miguel, what was it? Do you remember the first time when you had some sort of interaction or you first realized, you know, what Bigfoot is and how there's some creature out there like Bigfoot?
Oh, definitely. So I was born in 1971. We moved to Washington State out of kindergarten. I was here in Spokane, went to kindergarten, moved up north, maybe 65 miles in a little town called Chewelah. Now, Chewelah, Washington, anybody wants to look on a map, when I turned to go home off those freeway or highway there, 395 north, the sign says Grand Forks, BC, 74 miles, might say 76 miles, but it's up there towards Canada, you know. And so hearing a lot of these Bigfoot stories, you know, I hear a lot about the Seattle area and the Olympic Peninsula and whatnot. And me and my friends always thought that was city slicker stuff over there. We're the guys in the woods, you know. And when I was growing up, man, off old bus number 8, Cottonwood Road, as long as my school clothes were changed out if they were new, I was told to be home before dark. And my little Red Ryder BB gun and I and my twin brother and maybe a friend sometimes, we were out in the woods, man. That's all we did. I mean, and being in Chewelah, there's a lot of Native American Indian lore, and Chewelah actually is a word from Sahalish that means Valley of the Serpent, or Valley of the Snake. And I hear a lot of the Bigfoot stuff, and I'm sure you're familiar with the word skookum. Well, that's a Sahalish word in this area that I was told by one of the elders. It means Bigfoot. And we camped at Skookum Lake, and my dad was into hunting and camping. I graduated hunting course when I was 8 years old. I still have the other BB gun that was a gift for that. And, you know, part of the things that's just different these days, how our kids are raised and just whatnot, is, you know, we used to, you know, find the pile of BMX bikes, and that's where everybody was, you know. And we weren't really in the city, and Chewelah was so small, I don't know if you'd even call it a city. You know, I graduated, I believe, with maybe 38 kids, and there's still only one stop sign in that little town. And I don't know the population, but it's still really small. And like I said, off the bus in the woods we went, and because of the Indian stuff, you know, we'd find these structures, and they would look like teepees. You know, they'd be the typical angled wood, you know, that weren't like giant trees. They were, you know, biggest would be 6 inches around, but they were always just small poles. And we thought, in my young mind, and so we're talking first grade, second grade, third grade, young, you know, that the Indians must still be around, and this is just something that they were building, and maybe we came upon an old one, or maybe they're still here and we better get out of here, because sometimes we'd feel a little creeped out. And, you know, with technology now and all the sharing that's going on, just like you and I right now, you know, wood knocks and the howls and the whoops and all that stuff. You know, a few years ago when I started listening to these podcasts and whatnot, I was just like, holy moly, I heard that stuff all the time, you know, and we'd be out in the woods and we'd see something kind of funny, and we'd smell something weird, and we just thought, you know, we didn't know what to think. And, you know, now with all the sharing and all that stuff, you're like, oh, we were in the middle of it and didn't even know it, you know. And we would hear stories around the area. There was a bus driver / football coach up there that would literally get red-faced mad if you didn't believe his Bigfoot story. You know, the people that had those stories were serious. And, you know, like I said, I'm 54 now, and I think part of technology and the sharing that's gone on has loosened everybody's lips to the fact that you don't hear many people being concerned, at least my friends, saying, oh, I don't want to say anything because they're going to call me crazy and all that old cliche stuff, you know. And I think part of the world now is just really not thinking that way anymore. And so you're just seeing this flood of information and sharing going on. And because of the internet and these phones, you know, computer in your pocket, you're able to just click on stuff. Just like I clicked on your podcast and it was just like, holy moly, so many stories are so similar that it's just undeniable. And then plus, you know, the first time I really saw something was very, very strange because I wasn't sure what I was looking at. Okay, so if you're a guy standing in the woods and you think you see something, depending on how far away, you know, it is, because, for instance, I've been standing there, you know, being in Mother Nature, having to use the bathroom, and, you know, taking a pee behind a tree or whatever, and almost peed on a moose, and he was right there, and I never saw him. And your eyes and just the way you see things, and people that have never hunted or never seen anything in the woods, you know, and then they finally see it, your mind and your eyes kind of change. And for instance, one of the things that I noticed to be true, besides my soon-to-come crazy Bigfoot story that I have, was just simply picking morel mushrooms before. I'm not a big mushroom fan. I don't really care for them to eat that much, but for fun and being in the woods, we would, you know, be out there doing it. And a friend of mine had a dried morel in his hand. And this is what they look like, but this was kind of dry, so, you know, they might have more shape to them, but this is what you need to try to find. And I looked and was like, I don't see anything. And we got into a patch, and I was, you know, 10 feet away from a friend, and he's like, they're everywhere. And I'm like, well, I don't see anything. Well, once my eye saw one, it was like they just popped out of nowhere and came out of Mother Nature's natural camouflage, if you will. And there they were. And then your eye knows what to look for, and bingo, you can kind of see that. And young hunters have that same thing happen. You know, as a young person, my dad would say, there's a deer. And I'd be like, where? And once I saw one, then it was like, oh, you know what it looks like. And not just in a picture, but now you know what it looks like in Mother Nature amongst the trees, the bushes, the brush, different colors, different times of year, different situations. Is it going across the road? Is it up on a hill? Is it close? Is it far? Is it in a field? Which is also very tricky on the eye, because sometimes you can get out in that field and you notice that you're actually in 4-foot high grass, and that's the only reason why you saw the deer's little head sticking up. And as a young man hunting, you learn all those little tricks, if you will, little things. I've seen deer fight. I've seen deer breed. I saw a deer crawling on its hands and knees one time. This is part of the story. We were out hunting, and we were always conscious of the orange and the rules. And my dad was very, very strict. And with the grandkids and all that now, it's carried on with my daughters and other grandkids. Any kind of gun activity, if there was ever a gun in the room, even a BB gun, the mood changed, and everybody was supposed to be very serious, very cautious, very, I wouldn't say militant, but really very strict. And my dad was and he's 83 now, and he's a man's man. And being taught hunting was to be very, very serious, because it could be a lifesaver. Besides getting your own food and whatnot, he wanted to definitely let us know that it was an example of the way people have to live, and, they really have to live someday if, stuff ever got bad. And so, not just that, I was in the Boy Scouts as well, and, we went camping sometimes in some very remote places, and sometimes for fun. And sometimes it wasn't that fun for me, but he would say, we're going to bring a little bit of food, but we're going to go catch or hunt our dinner. And that was also a respect thing. If we ever shot anything, he would get a little irritated if once we got older, if we didn't eat what we shot. And, I've eaten some weird stuff. Chipmunks taste like pine trees, let me tell you that. We used to catch trout and, dress them out and stick them on a stick and roll them around in the fire like a hot dog on a stick. And I don't really care for fish because of that so much now, but we grew up maybe a little different than some, but I really appreciated it now because of just all the information. But as I was saying, and to all the arrow hunters out there, and I don't know about that because through my time and my friends' time and lots of other friends that I've had hunting, man, I've ran across some poor deer that I had to put out of their misery because they were, one or two arrows through them and they stank and they were dying, and just, oh man, arrows, I don't know. I'm not a fan of those because they don't always kill. And this was a fact of this deer. It was crawling. Chihuahua is also kind of an easy thing to follow because the local ski mountain there is called 49 degrees north, and that's a longitude latitude insignia of the 49 degrees. And I believe the Canadian border might be 50, I think. But anyhow, being that it's a local ski mountain as well, you're in some pretty high terrain, and the world changes a little in altitudes because the tree line stops. And so, if you ever watch a ski movie or whatnot, and these people are skiing or snowboarding in this beautiful field, you might just see one or two trees, and they just have this open powder field of snow to do whatever they want and turn however they want. It's a lot of fun. But that's at a certain elevation. So my dad, showed us the area, and when I was able to hop off the bus and just do what I want, that grew into the time when I was able to drive. And then, oh boy, howdy, we went everywhere. We'd get bored. There wasn't a whole lot to do in that time, and get a couple friends and our favorite cassette tape, and I'd jump in my little 82 four-wheel drive Subaru, and we would go places that were just insane. I mean, it developed into a friend of mine, and I've asked to use his name. His name's Kenny Fuller. He's a good friend of mine. We actually have our 35th high school reunion coming on up at the end of this month. And he worked for the DNR and then the Forest Service. And so, I mean, forever, so right out of high school. And I believe he still works for the Forest Service now. And he showed us some roads I just didn't even know. And I thought I knew, and we would go everywhere. I know trails that I could walk to Canada. And it was just, I don't know, nobody ever got hurt. We never really did anything dumb. We were just out cruising around just because there was not much else to do. And if you're hunting or a hunter, a lot of people held on to their special spot, their area where, their Boone and Crockett giant buck would come from, and nobody would tell, it was a secret. And that kind of was funny because it goes along with huckleberry picking, even people that go out and do their own like logging and getting wood, they don't like to tell anybody where their hot spot is, where they find the big logs and that sort of thing, And so as we're hunting, we see this deer. It's about a 4-point buck. It's got an arrow sticking out of it, and I believe it was on its last legs, and that's why it was crawling. Well, we're hunting. We're making sure that there's, a safe shot. We don't and haven't seen any orange. We haven't heard anybody use any calls. We haven't heard any other vehicles come in. We know the land really well. And I decide, even if I have to take it and put the tag on this thing, I'm going to put it out of its misery. And so, pull the trigger. It was a headshot. Fortunately, that I just ended it, and I don't mean to be rude or cruel, but the thing was just grossly shot with this arrow, and it was just nasty, and it stunk, and I was proud to take the shot and put that poor deer out of its misery. So as my friend and I are walking up towards this deer, the smell changes, and I'm thinking, man, this is bad. This is kind of wacky, and people that hunt that know that male deer in the rut, as they say, kind of stink anyway. The males get big and the glands start going, and it's part of their breeding thing with the smell. Which also, here in a second, I'll tell you guys about some of the Indian elders that have told me what the Sasquatch and the Bigfoot and the difference between male and female and why and what they're smelling. So as we're heading towards this deer, the smell changes, but with that, the mood changes too. The air gets kind of heavy, and then this animal just lost its life. There was a big loud shot, and so we didn't really think, like I've heard a lot of people think, I should have been aware that the forest gone quiet. There wasn't a chirp, there wasn't a frog, there was no insects doing anything. It was totally silent. Well, we just figured that maybe it was just us, and the mood was heavy, and it was stinking, and now the forest is really quiet. But I'm just kind of feeling, I've always been really sensitive to things, and I just felt like something just wasn't right. Well, as we get closer, my friend puts his hand out, he hits me in the chest, and he goes, and he's quiet, we're whispering, he's like, stop. And so we stop, and he ducks, and I kind of duck, and I'm looking, and I ask him, what's going on? What's going on? And he goes, I think there's a bear coming in for that deer. And I'm like, what? And so he hands me this viewfinder, and I'm trying to set the thing, and I can't get it in focus. And so I'm like, heck with that. And I stand up a little more to look at this thing. We're now about 40 yards away from it. And we see this black figure coming in. We see little flashes. We see stuff moving. It was in really thick, what we would call buck brush. And this deer is, I finally see the deer. I see this arrow sticking up. It's laying outside. I see the head. I see the horns. Out of these bushes, I see these arms come out, grab that deer by the horns, and twist its neck. And the way that it happened, besides it just being shocking to see these arms come out of these bushes like that, and we're talking, this thing looked like a bodybuilder. People say that, and people say that sometimes they can see through the fur or the hair, and that also comes into what elders have told me, that there's two different kinds of Bigfoot in the area, and their fur or their hair has to do with that. Fur like people would say, would be fur. Hair is like hair. This thing had hair. And when its arms came out of these bushes, you could see the hair kind of dripping off its arms. You could kind of see through to the skin, which looked, I guess, like human skin, but darker, but just not the same tone. It had kind of a khaki-colored tone, like a gunny sack bag, burlap bag, kind of. I don't know how to explain it. Khaki-colored. The thing was dark brown to black, depending on how the sun hit it. And when it grabbed that deer and did what it did, I just wanted to turn around and get the heck out of there. And my friend was just like, no, I don't think it knows we're here. Let's just wait. And it took everything I could. Just I was shaking so bad, to be honest. I wet myself, and I was almost in tears. I just had to go, and he just convinced me to grab me again and said, Miguel, just hold on. This is a chance of a lifetime. And I was just like, man, a chance to get killed. Look what it just did to that deer. And you can tell that creature had done that move before, for sure. And when it grabbed it and did its thing, it kind of, pulled on it, drug it in, and then we couldn't see. We could see stuff moving. We couldn't really see. And my friend was like, man, I didn't really see like hands. Are you sure? What are you talking about? Because I was telling him, that's not a bear. That's not a bear. Those are arms, man. And he's like, what do you mean arms? I'm like, arms, like a human. I saw a hand. It grabbed those antlers with a thumb. It wasn't a paw. It wasn't a strike. It wasn't a swipe. It was a grab, a twist, a pull, and power, brother. We're talking, it yanked that deer. It was kind of a strange. Buckbrush is when you're in buckbrush. The closest I could say that people might be able to recognize something like this would be, I've seen shots of people chasing feral hogs around, and they're in like these tubes where the animal has cored out the brush and is in the brush. That's how this was. They were in it. And when that creature pulled on this carcass, it was like the bush swallowed it. It was just kind of gone. And it was just the fact that it was in this hole, if you will, that was in the buckbrush. It pulled it towards itself, I would imagine, it's doing its deal. And then the stench came on real bad. And I think it was just because that deer carcass kind of let go. And we heard this thing kind of start gagging. And it sounded human, but not human, right? There was tones that were so deep that you've also heard people say, I could feel it in my chest and whatnot. Well, it didn't scream or howl quite yet, but it definitely had a voice that, and it was gagging. It was gagging, and so it wasn't really. I wasn't in the mood for comedy, but it was kind of comical in a way to hear this thing gagging. And me and my friend were like, okay, we need to get out of here. This is just get too weird, and the stench was just too much. Even at 45, 50 yards away. I don't know if we were downwind or what, but it was eye-watering bad. As we do this, we start backing out. We weren't in any buckbrush. We were above it. As the landscape went, we were probably maybe 20 feet higher than looking down this little hill, 45, 50 yards away. And we get up a little higher, kind of go around to the left. If I remember right, yeah, we went left out this just a little ridge, a little peak, and we get a better look at it. And this thing stands up. And that's when I was just like, I can't believe this is real. I've always heard about this. And this is going on when I'm maybe a year out of high school, so even 91 or so, and I graduated in 90. And anyhow, so this thing stands up, and it doesn't see us because the way we went, we were kind of like a 45-degree angle to it now. We're off of its, would have been its right shoulder. Let me see. Yes. Wait. Left shoulder, because we went left. It was turned. So out of its left shoulder, about a 45-degree angle, 20 feet higher, 45 yards away, we get this look at this thing. And I either smelt us or felt us, or we made a noise that it kind of turns. And I've heard people say, it didn't really have a neck. It was built like a football player. And they're right. This thing was just bodybuilder big. And when it turned, we could get kind of this profile, and then you saw the thickness of its body and its chest. And it was evident that there was no way that we were looking at a bear. There was no way we're looking at some human or whatnot. And just being from the area, both of us looked at each other and we're just like, that's a flipping Bigfoot. And I was in shock. He was in shock. And it's time to go. And so as we're backing out and getting ready to run, because we weren't far away from the road and the truck at this point, this thing kind of let out this maybe a growl or a grunt. It was just this really low, just kind of weird. I don't know if it was a last gag or something, but it went, and you could feel this thing, and it definitely saw us, because as soon as it saw us and made this noise, it sat down. And you could tell that motion was something that it had done 100 times too. It just was instantly just this little ball, and it almost went away. It almost looked like a rock at that point. And we were out of there at that point. We just had enough of that. I was just, besides me wetting myself a little bit and scared beyond belief, and my friend being done with me hanging out. Wait, let's look at this. We'd had enough, and we're out. We're done. And so the slow backing up turns into a full-blown turnaround and run. Okay? And so now we can hear this thing crashing through the brushes. And the buckbrush that it was in like, however you look at it, the very start of it or the very end of it, because it didn't take long for that thing to hit normal terrain, if you will, with trees and, the Pacific Northwest, pine trees and tamarack and some cedar and the normal vegetation of this thing. And we could just hear the thing going, and I thought, it's chasing us, but it wasn't. It was running away. And you could feel the ground almost shake with the weight of this thing, and the speed was uncanny. And I was fairly athletic, track, football, all that stuff. I have a couple of district records, maybe even stand. I don't know about that anymore, but I ran the 400 at 50 flat, and I was considered pretty fast. This thing, it would, and anybody that's ever seen a deer run, it would catch a deer with ease. And not just because of the speed, but just the overall power. It didn't matter if this thing was going up or down, what kind of up or down it was just nothing but power, speed, agility. At the very end, when we were up on the road, getting in the truck, we could see like the trees moving, and it was over this hill and it was gone. But the vegetation and everything, the land and the whole environment was just so interrupted by this bulldozer going through the woods like that. And that was my first encounter with Bigfoot, was that right there. It changed the way I ever went into the woods for my entire life. Camping, I wanted to share this with my kids, like my dad, myself, and so I kept that story quiet for a long time. But I didn't want to scare them. I have 2 daughters, and they camp and fish and do their thing now, and they're not worried about it. As a father, I worry about it a little bit. But you can't let that stuff fade you too badly, you know. You don't want to just... I feel bad for the stories and the people that say that they just can't do it, period, at all, ever, anymore. And this wasn't even at night. This was, you know, probably 11 in the day, before noon, because we were out there early. We got out there not super early. Some hunters are out there crack of dawn, and you know, we're ding-dong high school kids. We're out there probably 10 a.m. And it was about an hour before we saw this, you know, and that was my first encounter with seeing something like this up there.
Miguel, that is intense, man. Thank you for sharing that. Can you remind me real quick, was this in the Chewelah area then that this all happened?
Yes. So about 8 miles away from Chewelah, there's another little town, and we're talking little. I think there's a tavern, a post office, and a store. It's called Valley, Washington. And Valley is 8 miles away from Chewelah. And that's nothing in the world of hunting. 8 miles from where I was is nothing. Some people drive way into the woods, or from Spokane way into the woods, you know, 100 miles, 80 miles. This is just a few miles from my house. So this is home cooking for me. You know, Valley, there's it's called Marble. There's another, I don't know if it's really designated or maybe a nickname, but we all called it Iron Gates. And it was just the Iron Gates that was kind of the end of the road above Waits Lake. People can look that up in Valley, red marble, Iron Gates. And I'm pretty sure it was Boise Cascade. It wasn't the Colville National Forest, because I got another story about Bigfoot there that is above still my parents' house past Chewelah. You know, tell a secret, that's where all the high school kegs went down, is in a place called the Meadows in Colville National Forest. But the Iron Gates were just like a Boise Cascade gate that you could drive no further, but was always open to hunting and whatnot. And so that's where we were. We were probably at about maybe 4,000, under 4,500, between 4,000 and 4,500 elevation. You could see the lake down below. It's a beautiful country. But that's where we were at when all this happened, in Stevens County, Washington.
Do you remember when you're taking it all in, you're there in the moment, you see it happen? Were you able to see any details of the face of the creature at all?
You know, yes and no. With all the obstruction and all the adrenaline and all the just madness going down, your mind, at first I was just like, I can't even believe this is true. And I was excited too. I was like, it's real. It's real. You know, I was torn in so many places in my head, how to feel and how to act in that instant time, besides just being scared and excited, and your adrenaline and the fear and just all the everything. You know, there's a lot of people that say, oh, I wish I would have done that, or oh, I could have done that, or if I would have just, you know, but it's in a time when that thing looked over its shoulder, and like I was describing, its no neck having giant big body upper, just massive. It is so hard to describe that. The only thing I've seen that would make sense is a picture I saw of somebody just on a YouTube online thing. It was a lady at a zoo feeding a polar bear, and she had some food on a stick and was holding her arm in the air with a stick to get up to it, and this polar bear stood up and just absolutely dwarfed this woman. And that's the only thing I'm seeing that would portray how big the thing was. But I mean, big, but I'm saying like maybe the height. But the bear had nothing on the width and the I think the most impressive thing was the body shape was very human-like, but not because it was just so flipping huge. Now the face, the one thing I can say, and I just ran across it early this year, and people I'm sure will be able to find this. I believe the man's name is Todd Standing, I think, and he's got a couple of pictures on one of his shows of two different Bigfoot that he caught. And I believe he called the darker one Jake or something like that. And I could say that it looked like that. It was very dark. Its hair would thin a little bit around the nose and the mouth and the eyes, but definitely like a full face of hair, if you will. And I want to say hair. It seemed like the facial hair would not be like a beard, like people beard. It was hair. Its head. Okay, I've got pretty long hair. And the way it hangs on a human, it's not like that on this creature. Not this thing I saw. It didn't look like it had a haircut, obviously, but it didn't have hair going down its back, I guess, if you will, on the head. It was just this ball. It kind of had a conical shape that people talk about, but not so much. It wasn't a human head. It wasn't a gorilla conical pointy kind of head. It had a look kind of like that, but more human. And it was so dark I couldn't really get any definition of any eyes. I didn't see any whites at all. I saw its nose and its mouth. I didn't ever see any teeth. It didn't have any expression on its face, it seemed. And it was a super short experience that I could see that kind of angle, if you will, to the way it turned and looked. It wasn't looking right at me. We weren't square face to face. It was kind of turned. But the picture that, like I said, I believe his name is Todd Standings, the Jake Bigfoot that he gets a picture of, the dark one. It was like that. If anybody has seen that picture. Have you seen the picture? Do you know what I'm talking about, Jeremiah?
I absolutely do. And I was going to comment that it is interesting that has come up. I think this is about the third or fourth time where witnesses have specifically mentioned that individual that with Mr. Standing. So very, very strange things indeed that it keeps being brought up. And it sounds like it's a thing where, I mean, to be honest, you're not 100% sure of his name, It is Todd Standing, though. You are correct. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. What?
Yeah.
Wild stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you've already mentioned that you're sensitive in different ways to things growing up. Did this encounter change any of that or bring things out in your life, or what was your reaction and how did your life change after having this encounter?
Wow. I've never been asked that. Great question, brother. It totally did in hindsight. Besides the fact that going in the woods was a different game at this point. That was definitely a thing. But as far as the sensitivity and any of that, I believe it didn't really bring it on any harder, but it definitely made me realize that a lot of the things that were happening in my life, and that I was still really young, a year out of high school, and being that I'm 54 now, and the things that have happened to me and whatnot, with remote viewing and other psychic things and craziness that has been around me with my friends and I, it let me know that if Bigfoot was real like that, then a lot of other things could definitely be real. Because up until that time, I was on board with the idea, especially now being able to have this technology shared and being able to hear the whoops and the wood ducks and the howls and the screams. We grew up with that. Those wood knocks were like almost every time we went in the woods. I mean, the wood knock was just like, oh yeah, it was not a big deal. But now you're like, hey, wait a minute. That was no joke. That was a wood knock of this creature. And now I know that creature is real because of my first experience. And so I now know that if that is real, then a lot of other stuff could be real. And a lot of things that have happened to me and happened that my memory recalls were real or could be real. The second thing that I've seen in the woods, I was about 27 years old. I was so scared I called home to mama. I was up on Mount Spokane. I love bicycles, and I was fortunate enough to land a job right out of high school when I moved from Toledo to Spokane at a place called Garland Cycle. And Garland Cycle was a third generation Schwinn shop. And so it was really fun for me to learn a lot about just the history of Schwinn and more about the bikes, and mountain bikes were coming on, and I kind of left the BMX thing and worked at this bike shop with mountain bikes. So now I'm in the mountains on a mountain bike. And Mount Spokane hosted the Nationals it was years ago. I think maybe it was 94, 96-ish. So there was lots of mountain biking going down in this area. And I was with another buddy or two, and they had taken off to go get the car because I had just crashed and my rear wheel was done. And I did what I could. I had a spoke wrench with me and trying to get this thing round again. It was popping spokes and it wasn't fitting through the frame anymore, and I couldn't manipulate this Pringle of a wheel any longer. And we weren't that far from the car. So they were like, hey, we're just going to go down and get the car. We'll take the carcass of this bike down if you don't want to drag it down and walk. And I'm maybe 400 yards from the car. You could almost see the parking. Well, you could see the edge of the parking lot. It's called Kirk's Lodge on Mount Spokane. It's gone through a different owner, but I believe it's still Kirk's Lodge. So away they go, and I'm kind of kicking rocks, a little disappointed. I'm looking at my wounds. I'm like, okay, I'm okay. That was silly. I just crashed. And da-da-da. And so I take my helmet off. I was wearing a full-face helmet, and I'm carrying this helmet. I've got this Camelback on with some water, and I eat this Cliff Bar, and I'm walking, about halfway down, and I get this feeling again, and my hairs go up on my neck and my arms. There wasn't any smell or anything like the first time this whole thing happened, but I instantly went back to that, and I'm like, okay, my body's telling me something. I've already seen this. This is not to be taken lightly. What do I need to do? And I start looking around, and if you're seeing something through the woods, depending on how far it is, you start kind of bobbing and weaving your head, maybe your knees, and you're kind of shucking and jiving to see maybe over a limb or through the trees or branches, and you spot something, you're kind of moving to get a better look, just a little. My head's bobbing. I'm like, what am I seeing here? And see this outline of this shape. And at first I'm like, okay, it's not dark, it's not black, it's not very big, it's not Bigfoot. Okay, I'm cool. But I'm looking at this thing. It's about, I'd say 300 yards away, slightly downhill. I'm on a trail, so I got a little bit of opening around me. But as I'm looking through this thing, I can see a shape is all. And as I'm starting to, bob and weave my head, this flipping thing mimics me. And when it did that, and I saw it kind of just move up and down like I was, it freaked me out so bad. Excuse me, I just got an adrenaline dump on that one. I'm sweating right now. Wow. Ugh. So this thing starts to mimic me, and I can remember kind of standing up straight, and I believe I crossed my arms, and I kind of did like the head shake, like no, and I couldn't see a head per se, but I could see like a silhouette or a body shape. It was hard to see because of where it was, but you could see you could see the environment kind of moving. It's really hard to describe it. The closest thing I could say, it was like if you see the Terminator movie and you see that thing, and you kind of see this clear, see-through sort of shapely deal, but it was more solid than that. It wasn't transparent. It's so hard to describe. It had kind of a color maybe to it, like a light gray ish, like elephant skin, kind of like that. No hair, nothing. And when I shook my head no, it mimicked me, and it started to vibrate like it was shaking its head no so fast that it just dissipated into nothing. It disappeared. I was staring right at it. And at that point, I'm running. I'm like, no way. Well, in that era, mountain bikes had what they call clipless pedals. And my shoes had a cleat on the bottom of them that were dedicated to click in the pedal like a ski binding in a way. And so they're not normal shoes. And I'm running, I'm a young man, I'm in shape, but I can't run fast enough, and I wound up eating it. I fall down because I can't keep up myself running. I'm so freaking scared. And I fall, and that scares me even worse. And I was so tripped out at that time that I don't remember so much the last couple hundred yards, but I just popped out of the trail on the parking lot there at Kirk's Lodge, and my friends look at me and they're like, what is going on with you? And I was like, I saw something in the woods. I don't know what it was. It just made this weird vibrating thing. And it just disappeared. I don't know what to say. And they're close friends of mine. And so I'm not scared of telling them what I'm telling them. And my other buddy had seen some stuff. He grew up in Colville, which is maybe another 30 miles north towards Canada. And they're in some rugged terrain too. And he's also a hunter and whatnot. And he goes, man, I've heard some things around Mount Spokane, and there's a lot of people that say, Bigfoot. And I'm like, no, it's not a Bigfoot, man. It was not that. And we they already had stuff in the car, and we jumped in the car, and we're done. I'm out. When I get back to Spokane, I'm still so scared. I call my mom, Mom, I'm scared. I can't believe what I saw, and this and that. And she's passed now, but she was always very motherly and very caring and willing to listen to whatever I had to say, because she had her and my dad had their own moments too. And so my kids. And that kind of gets me into the paranormal thing, where you also hear sometimes that maybe people think that certain things happen to generations, if you will. or maybe sensitivity passed on, or things like that. But she was very open and listened to me and could tell that I was in tears. You know, I'm 27 years old and I'm crying like a baby to my mommy. That's how bad this thing scared me. It scared me worse than the Bigfoot experience did, because I couldn't tell what it was, and it didn't do anything even part of this world, I don't think. The way it vibrated and shook its body until it went into nothing, I don't even know how to explain it. I don't even know what to say any more than what I just said. That's what happened. The only thing I can say, and I've asked permission, his name is Eric Johnson. I've told this exact story amongst my friends, and as I'm saying this in the past, about 10 years ago, my buddy Eric shows me his arm, and he's like, look, and he goes, wait, and he runs in his bedroom, and he comes back with this rifle, 273. And I'm like, okay, what's this have to do with my story? And he goes, dude, I saw the same thing, exactly how you said it. And he goes, when you said elephant skin, that's when I was like, whoa. And he shows me this rifle that was his late dad's that was given to him. And he said he was armed. He had this rifle with him. And as he's showing me this thing, I noticed that it's bent. The barrel of this rifle was bent because he was so scared running. When he fell down, he bent the barrel of that gun. And him and I's story are almost, I mean, they are exactly the same as far as the way I described that, you know, he had the same experience about 15 miles away from where I was, about 2 years after my experience with that.
Well, that's some wild stuff, Miguel. My goodness. I've never heard anything like that before.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier before we started recording, you know, depending on how this conversation goes, my life has been filled with stuff like that. And to skip a bunch of stories, to fast forward, I have, well, I don't even know what to say. It's so sad. I have had, I don't know, a best friend for the last 25 years that I have talked to and seen nearly every day. I asked him to be the godfather of my kids. Excuse me. I haven't seen him for 2 years. The last thing he said to me was, sorry. He said, Miguel, I'm going to protect you. And left. Well, I haven't totally asked permission because I obviously haven't seen him, so I can't totally say a whole lot. But I can say that he sold his house, had a lot of strange things going on. That night that he left and said, Miguel, I'm going to protect you, he was showing my wife and my one daughter and myself, there was 4 of us, including him, you know, him, my wife, Arian, myself, my daughter, Samara, all standing there looking at his phone and showing me these new sets of cameras that he had. And something came on camera and there was nothing to be seen. It was his kitchen. And like I said, I can't say a whole lot without his permission. I don't think, I don't know what's going on yet. I want to protect him as much as he said he's going to protect me. But there was something on that camera that sounded just like myself and my wife's voice, but it wasn't us. And he had a lot of, I could tell you some stories about that house. I don't know what the heck. But just about 3 weeks ago, I couldn't take it anymore. I wrote a 6-page letter to the person that lives there now about things that went on in that house. And the last straw, if you will, My twin brother is very handy. He was helping my buddy build walls and redo the basement in lieu of selling his house. And long story short, as he was sitting there in the job trailer on a 5-gallon bucket, my brother was rolling up an extension cord. And I've asked him permission, and he said, go ahead. My twin brother's name is Mark. Mark and Mike. Marcos and Miguel. He's sitting on his bucket and looks to his left, and there staring at him is a little gray alien. Now, that's a whole story in itself that I can tell if anybody wants to hear, but my buddy had so many crazy things happen at that house, and that was the last straw, and he had sold that house. I haven't seen him. I don't know where he went. I don't know where he is. I don't know. I really would like to call his parents or go there and just ask if he's okay. I don't know. So I sent this 6-page letter to the person that lives there now and told him some things, because as a father, I couldn't handle the thought of if a new person has a family, I just had to tell him, whoever, and the person reached out to me after, I gave him my phone number and whatnot. And to be fair, I gave him my address because I knew his address. I don't know this man's name. I don't even know if it was a man that responded to me. It was texting through the phone, and he said, or she said, that they were using Google to protect their phone. And I told him 2 or 3 stories, and about the gray alien and things, and about that house. And person said that they've had no issues and whatnot. So that's awesome. But that was just a few weeks ago.
I mean, oh, wow, dude. You're going through a lot, Miguel. This is a lot that you go through, man.
Dude, you have no idea.
I don't. Yeah, I know this is just the tip of it. Tip of the iceberg.
One of the things with my life in the last few years is indirect. Well, I got hurt at work, and this is hard. I'm going to try not to cry on this one. I lost both legs. I'm now a double amputee. And I've been in my room for a long time. Years. And so I've been watching these podcasts and interesting things and trying to keep my mind somewhere else. And I've always liked to learn. And watching your podcast with Martin Groves, it totally changed my life. I used to be very religious, and I got away from it for a long time because the stories in the Bible were just too much. They're too outlandish for me at the time, and I thought to myself, this can't be real. And there were other things, but that was basically the main bones I had to pick with the Bible, if you will, where I just couldn't believe it. Well, hearing the podcast with you and Martin, and just that man's demeanor, I believe him 9,000,000% that he's telling the absolute truth about his experience in Tennessee and Kentucky with dogmen and whatnot. Excuse me, sorry. Like I said, I'm a pretty sensitive guy. Hearing that story in the podcast made me dive in big time. I've listened to hundreds of podcasts, hundreds. I mean, not just yours, but anything that seems to be interesting. I just love to listen to this stuff, and I feel so sensitive with Martin's story because he always says God bless, and the way he recited that prayer, and the way he said that it was the thing that gave him strength and changed his life and maybe saved his life. I can tell you, if Martin ever hears this, that his story has saved my life with our Lord Jesus Christ, because I believe him, and if that stuff's real, and it is, that the Bible has to be real. And so, for the last maybe 4 months, I've been religiously praying again, and have gotten back to my roots with the Lord, and I can't thank him enough for that. I'm sorry, excuse me. These are tears of joy, just so everybody knows, and I hope you don't edit this out. I want to be taken seriously, and I'm 100% not exaggerating or embellishing any of these stories in any way. And I have plenty of friends and people that are around me to verify this stuff. And if I can say anything to anybody that's listening to this, that our world is way more profound than we all think. I just want to let everybody know that the world is so profound that a lot of the things that you hear that you might scoff at, you might want to not scoff, but you might want to listen to these people, especially if they're talking about Bigfoot, because Todd Standing's pictures, I don't know what people want more than that. I mean, you can tell those pictures are real. I don't know. I've never been fooled by any AI computer-generated stuff. You can tell when that stuff is not real. At least I think I can. There's some stuff that's definitely too, it's just, you can tell. Those pictures that man has got of those two Bigfoot, those are real. And not only because I saw one that looked like the creature he calls Jake, but also because growing up in Cholula, I worked at a place that is now a casino, Indian reservation, right? It was just a bingo hall back then. There were no machines and all that stuff. Dating myself a little here now. But out of high school, working at a bingo hall, you're like a waiter. People are sitting down playing bingo. So, I'm their legs. I'm getting their pull tabs or their lunch, or, running around and giving them some coffee or whatever. I was a high school kid. And that was my job. Well, being that was Indian reservation, whatever, I had the opportunity, I worked there for some time, to kind of move up and get off the floor and not be a waiter. And I was given the opportunity to handle all their money as a high school student. My mom worked there as well in the advertising marketing world. And every Friday afternoon, we were followed by a state trooper and a res cop, as we call it, reservation police officer, to the bank in Cholula, given, I won't say how much money, but a lot, and followed to the bingo hall, we called it, just the edge of Cholula, which is now called Spokane Indian, or we call it Spokane Indian Bingo back then. It's now called Cholula Casino, I believe. They just built a motel and expanding, and they've got gas stations now. It's a whole different world. But working there for the years that I did, and then handling their money, I have their trust to do that as a young man. I was in high school doing this stuff. I'm good with math, and helped to write a lot of the programs, and I'm really pretty proud of this. And I can't totally remember. It's either between 11 or 13. It's under 15, but I think I've counted 13 people I remember 13 of us were able to, for the first time, make that Spokane tribe of Indians enough money that their peoples were able to receive like a per capita check that a lot of other Indian worlds have had, and they have never had until that bingo hall made money. And I wrote the programs to revamp, and were able to make that place a lot of money. But because of the trust that I had and the friends that I made, there were a few other high school students there that were living on the Indian res that I've had a lot of information told me, just like the word skookum. That's the Sahalish word for Bigfoot. And, you know, my name's Miguel, and I'm Spanish descent, and I've got long black hair, and I'm dark, and I kind of look native. Probably am. My mom was adopted, and, you know, that's a whole other story, too. Anyway, so, you know, they trusted me, and so I was privy to a lot of information, and that gets into the Bigfoot world, too. So I've been told that the reason why you smell different smells is the time of the year that they hibernate is also conducive with the time of the year, maybe not the time of the year, but when the female Bigfoot ovulate and are breedable. And the smells that one might smell have to do with a male or a female. And also that I was told by Indian elders of the Spokane tribe, there's 12 bands of the Spokane Indians is what I'm aware of, that go into also, I'm sure you've heard of the Kalispell, because there's a lot of Bigfoot stories of Kalispell Indians. There's also Colville Indians, Okanagan, but the Spokane and Okanagan res is quite large and pierces up into Canada and gets into some rough terrain. And some friends of mine like to kind of flex their rights as tribal people and be on horseback, and they can cross the border, maybe not so much now, but back then at will on a horseback. You know, they didn't really have to. It was their Indian land, and they were going to do what they wanted on that land. And so for some of those people to be up in the woods where absolutely no man land is, they were there. And, you know, I believed them when they were telling me this Bigfoot stuff, especially after I saw one, you know, like the way I did and whatnot. And, you know, that was quite interesting. I was just flabbergasted that they were saying such particular information that I haven't really heard before. I don't know if anybody has made that association, but I was told that the stench of the putrid smell that you may experience with the Bigfoot creature is taken as a sign of wealth and an enticing thing to a female Bigfoot, because the rotten meat sort of smell is supposed to be taken as I was told, like Bigfoot's got it going on. He's got a lot of food. He stinks so much, he's got so much food. And they say that the females are attracted to that. And so I kind of affiliate that with deer in the rut. They stink. And it's a pheromone thing, you know. And then the way that I was told that they hibernate, and they hibernate not so much of the season, but I was told that they hibernate depending on the family's woman Bigfoot ovulating. And if there's another Bigfoot tribe in the area, that the Bigfoot tribe, when it's their turn, if you will, they will go and hibernate, not to disrupt another Bigfoot's opportunity to breed because there's no competition. And I thought that was interesting, and it makes kind of sense to me. And I've never heard that information before, but I was told many things about Bigfoot and, other creatures of the world and what it meant, what it means when a hawk flies by you in front of you, and a crow, and coyotes and wolves and owls, big time owl. A lot of information about owls and Native Americans for sure. And if you go into Chihuahua, right there on City Hall, it's one stoplight in 5 minutes, and Chihuahua's done. It's small, but right there on the 395 that pierces the town right in half, on City Hall painted is a portrait of an Indian person, male, with his headdress and everything, with his arms open, and I believe he's holding a spear or maybe a bow. He's in his full dress, and his arms are open, and it's this valley, and there's woolly mammoths and the creatures and birds in the thing, and represents that stuff. And like I said earlier, Chihuahua is Valley of the Snake or Valley of the Serpent. And, growing up there, kind of like being a farm kid in a way, and we bucked hay and took care of animals and stuff. And one of my first jobs, it was horrible. We were in a dirt field dragging a trailer with no wheels. It was just a flat board thing, skiff thing, and we were to pick rocks out of the field. And anything bigger than a softball or whatever, throw it on the trailer, and we're picking rocks. But we found a lot of arrowheads, a lot of mortar and pestles, and we donated them to the little Chihuahua museum that's there and whatnot. And so Indian lore and Indian influence and stories and elders telling me stuff, I always really took that stuff to heart and seriously. And they don't share. They're very private peoples in a lot of stuff, as people know. And for them to teach me some words and to teach me some of their stuff, and to hear that information about Bigfoot and whatever, because I told that story, and one of the people that was listening to me at the time, he's passed, unfortunately. His name is Ron Gutierrez. And Ron Gutierrez, he's from a pretty big Native family at Wellpennant, Washington there. And we had his wake. There was kind of invite only, and it was intense. Now, some of the songs that you'll hear, at a powwow or whatever, and you ever heard the, natives singing and pounding the drum and all that stuff, and the wailing that they do, there's also a song that the wailing that they do is to imitate some of the wailing that Bigfoot sounds like. And when they do that, they're honoring the totem pole and different things. And when you look at a totem pole, the very lowest figurehead is compared to what they find most important to them. And as they go up, it means different things. So when I heard that the song that they were doing was kind of a feature, that the wailing that they did and whatnot, and the sounds that you can find online with some of the stuff, because they're human, they can't do it, but you can definitely tell that they're trying to mimic some of the sounds and the wailing that those creatures make. And also, for listeners out there, not always are those Bigfoot sounds totally Bigfoot sounds. You have to be careful, I believe, because I also think, and I've been told, that there's two kinds of Bigfoot, and that touches into the flesh and bone Bigfoot and the paranormal Bigfoot, where you hear about orbs, you hear about maybe even a Bigfoot being around an orb. Martin Groves described his hunter friend seeing two orange orbs. Now, orange has to do, I've been told, through the elders of Indians, that the orange depicts the spiritual traveling, more, they described it as an older, more sacred, spiritual, not always of this realm, Bigfoot. And that's the picture of the orange one that you see in Todd Standing's picture. That orange Bigfoot, if you see those two Bigfoot, look at that Bigfoot again. And you'll go back to the fact that I was trying to explain that the fur is different than hair. You know, the way that the Jake Bigfoot looks is similar, but nothing like that orange one. That orange one has got, besides orange, the nose is different, the mouth is different, the face structure is a little different, the way the hair grows on the face is totally different. And when you look at the top of the head of the orange one, the way the hair is, it reminds me of the little toys with the little crazy hairdo. They used to be, when I was a kid, they were called trolls, and they were little pencil tops. And you'd spin the pencil and his hair would freak out, and it was kind of funny, haha. Well, that weird kind of hair is what's on the orange one, and that's more like fur. The dark one has more like hair. Now, the orange one, I've been told, is from an orange orb. And when you look at the picture of that orange one, that one scares me. The way the eyes are, the way that thing looks, and it's just almost emotionless. That one is the one to worry about. And I've been told that those are the ones, as Todd said, they're watchers. Now, when you get into the biblical thing and watchers and whatnot, there's another video that I've seen of Mr. Groves talking to some people, and for just a quick second, he alludes that he respects the Mormon community. He doesn't really get into it too much, but he's trying to drop a hint. Now, I've got a friend that is very religious in the Mormon stuff, and they keep secrets big time. Now, if you're into that Mormon, and you know that Freemasonry is very similar in a lot of ways to Mormons, and one of the things is keeping secrets. Now, we were talking one day about Bigfoot and stuff like that, and he's got his own experiences and beliefs, and he was so careful that we were at a job site, it was ready for lunch, we were in his little truck. As we're talking, he turns the truck on, turns the radio on, leans over and whispers this into my ear, because he's that trying to be secretive in it about it. And he told me that certain Mormon beliefs are that Bigfoot is one of the cursed to walk the earth in the story of Abel and Cain.
I have heard that before, and it is, I'm not one that is very knowledgeable in that religion, but I have heard that before, and it's very, very interesting if you look into that story.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. Who knows? You know, I think that story might stick in a lot of ways, but again, with this technology and the sharing that's going on, we now know that, you know, it's just not Patty in California, like Martin says. You know, it's just not that. They're all over the place, you know, everywhere. And I think that Bigfoots would be a lot like humans as far as Native Americans, African Americans, Norwegians, Latinos. There's just different kinds, you know, different offspring. And I think they've been here since the dawn of time. And it's just the technology now has kind of caught up to the point where you're seeing pictures and people are sharing stories, and the taboo has been lost. I think almost. I don't know any friend of mine that has a story, they'll spit it out. Maybe because I'm trustworthy and we're friends, but the taboo and cliche seems to be falling away. Would you not agree that people are just
totally
way
agree.
more open with all this?
Oh yeah, we're at the point where it's everyone can share, and it's not a problem. Yep, 100%. Miguel, my goodness, there's a few things I wanna address. And you've shared some extremely personal things, and thank you for doing so. And just hearing your account about how the interview with Martin, who is, I want to tell you a story about that if I can. This is one I haven't really told, just because it's time. Okay, so before that interview that you heard, and I'm in the room before the people come in to listen, and it's me and Martin, and I look over at Martin, and he just has this sense about him that I can only explain as to, it was like he had huge wings protecting him on his back. And I was like, wow, this is intense. And I didn't know anything about Martin's background. And I was like, Martin, would you like to pray? So we actually prayed together before that interview. And, I'm a Christian myself. And, I've talked to Martin a lot since then. He is a extremely, he's a man of God. I mean, he's a Christian as well. And we've had some really good chats off record. But, I mean, it's just interesting that interview, hearing that was what was able to bring you back to the faith in the Bible. And I'm going to make sure that he knows that, because that would just make his heart be so joyful, I think. So thank you for sharing that. That is probably that makes everything else worth it for this. It's very rare that someone has the trust of the First Nations people. I can think of now yourself, but also it reminds me of, talking to Henry Franzoni, how he was able to have that trust because he worked for the people for so many years out there in the Pacific Northwest, and they trusted him with a lot of information. So I want to say thank you for sharing that. It's just, you've had an incredible journey over the years. And thank you for sharing it. This is an area where, I know Chewelah has a lot of stuff going on, but I think you're the first person maybe on the show to share a lot of personal accounts from this area. So thank you.
Yeah, I thank you. I mean, it's given me a chance to get some more information out, and that's a big part of this, is the technology is being able to connect people and to open people's eyes and ears more, and to have a safe space to say, hey, that thing that I heard on that show, I heard that too. And whatnot. One of the friends of mine, being in the DNR and Forest Service for so long, his stories, he's got a few too. I have a few friends that have their own stories as well, just from the same area. But being that was in the DNR and Forest Service, we're talking since high school, man, years and years and years and years. Talking to him once, it was pretty funny. I go, well, what did you hear? And there's a slight pause, and then both at the same time, in the same pitch, in the same sound, we both at the same time went, whoop! and we laughed, and he's like, yeah. He goes, wood knocks. He told me I was so far away, as he put it, from civilization that there was no way that could have been a human. That was his main sentence, is no way that could be a human. That guy, he was able to show me some roads. I mean, he knows that area big time. as, Forest Service and DNR people would, and, I've got another friend, that is, the nickname is called a hot shot. And it's a firefighter that'll jump out of a plane, to fight fire. And there's been some gnarly fires through the years up here, and whatnot. And he's been a part of some of that stuff. And he's a couple generations deep into that world. And we haven't totally got into the meat and potatoes a bunch, but he is very adamant about knowing that when Mount St. Helens blew, that some of the hot shots and stories in that community were privy to the fact that there was not only Bigfoots recovered, but Bigfoots communicated with. And there was a person of the military that seemed to know, or maybe Bigfoot knew, language enough to communicate between each other. Human and Bigfoot communicating through language. He won't say or hasn't said if it's a man knowing Bigfoot words or if it's Bigfoot knowing human words. I think it was Bigfoot knowing human words, because I've also been in the woods and have heard that, as people say, like samurai, look at that, weird. Mm-hmm. It sounds Asian or Oriental and babbling and whining or crying like babies. I've also been told that is a female, and that is maybe one of their calls in a way to say that she's ready to be, ready to breed, if you will. And like some animals have female and male calls, that the baby crying that you hear is a female Bigfoot calling out for a mate. That is another thing that I've been told by the Sahelish people. Now, they had another word, and I apologize for anybody Sahelish that I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, but their word for some of this was suwape. And I'm not totally got that right. They have a certain way that suwape, kind of a weird way they pronounce it, but it means other than them. Now, we laughed, and, we're cutting it up, and, I'm from Latino, and I said, like, gringo? And they're like, no, it doesn't have anything to do with race. It has to do with humanity, that we can communicate, but you're just not one of us. And I said, one of us, like tribal? And they go, no, human. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting tidbit, Now, I also know the grandson of the lady that has brought the Sahelish language back to life. And if you go to the Grand Coulee Dam, they've got like laser light shows and things that they do out there. And the woman's voice that you hear narrating some of that stuff, and that has been writing books and reviving language of the Sahelish, is my friend's grandmother. His name is Arnold Alexi. Now, his brother, Sherman Alexi, has written books and actually made a movie. I can't remember the name of the movie offhand, but very respected people in the community up there and whatnot. And he was trying to tell me that some of the words are really difficult, not so much to pronounce or whatnot, but just they don't have words. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, think about it, man. If you're a Native American in a teepee back in the day, there's no word for microwave. And I thought, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. So he said some of the struggles is there's no words for what they're trying to portray. And one of the words that he could explain that meant just not us, and it boiled down to no, not human, was suape. Have you ever heard skookum is their word for Bigfoot?
Oh, I have heard that, there's this really great book that we've already mentioned him in this episode. Henry Franzoni came out, and you can get it on Amazon. It's a e-version only now, but he went through and analyzed pretty much the entire map of the U.S., and he goes through and shares, okay, this word skookum, here's the meaning behind it, but here's all the places in the U.S. it's used in different areas and why that's significant. So it's very interesting when you look into the meaning behind certain words that are used regarding Bigfoot.
Yeah, interesting. Can I ask again, sir, what was the name of the man that you mentioned? I'm going to write that down because I haven't run across this man's information. What was his name again?
Yeah, so his name was Henry Franzoni. He has written a few books. He has passed on, but you can find. I interviewed him a few times, but he's got interviews out there, and they're very interesting. You'll learn a lot from what he shares for sure.
Cool, Henry Franzoni. Got you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Chihuahua is such an interesting place. It's very mysterious. Quick side shoot, my brother, when he saw that little gray, he's had missing time. Just recently, he said he's willing to go into regressive hypnosis to maybe get to the bottom of some stuff. It definitely popped my head and sent me back to a time of different things. And I don't know if you want to get into it or later or another show or whatever, but I'm 90% sure that maybe my brother as well, have been, it's so hard to say, abducted. And it's to the point where I'm going to go to the very first house that I grew up there in Cottonwood Road, where a lot of this stuff was happening in my young life. And I have a question or two for the people that still live there. I would have to video, and I plan on videotaping it, so there's no way that somebody could say that this was a prefab thing or made up. And the only information I can say that will make sense if this ever comes to light is it simply has to do with if there's a certain water spigot in the back of this house still, or remnants of. It all makes sense, and it sounds too weird, but if I'm able to have the agreement of these people to let me videotape them answering that question, it can prove a lot of things. Now, that being said, Spokane is in the 509. That's our phone area code, right? My dad is a retired union Boilermaker, and so is my twin brother. Welders good enough that they signed non-disclosure agreements long time ago and worked at Hanford, which isn't far away, which is a nuclear site here in Washington State. Well, a lot of people don't realize that I've heard 76, but I've heard 74 a few more times. That 74% of the uranium that was used to make the plutonium that came from Hanford was the plutonium, and this part's all fact, that was used to make the bomb for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Well, my brother feels like that little gray was trying to ask, if you will, what does 509 mean? Because the bomb group that was part of that is the 509th bomb group, and all that uranium came from off the Indian res called Tum Tum, and the road name I think has been changed, but I know somebody with a sign, and it's still pretty public record. It's called Uranium Road. And all that uranium came from, 15 minutes, 20 minutes away from my house that I grew up in the 509th area code, 509th bomb group. And the last thing that my brother and my dad were working on was a project out of Hanford, super secure, armed guards everywhere, super high security clearances. And they were simply welding tubes and whatnot. And it was the very, very first start of CERN. They were part of that. Now, I've got some recordings of my dad and me talking because he's getting old, and, he's got some profound stories. And that kind of gets into, like people say, the generations of maybe your grandma had something happen, and now your mom, and now you. That's gone down with my dad, myself, and now my daughters as well. And, when I asked him, what they were doing, he spat it right out. He said, well, we're making this thing because they were going to ship it down to the border of Italy or France because it's an antenna for aliens. This is the exact sentence. And I have things recorded about that. Now, another kind of a weird trip. My dad, when he was growing up, he could not walk. Now, I don't know how old you are, if you're a music fan, but if you know the band Sublime and that song, I don't practice sangria,
right.
I don't have no crystal ball, you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Okay, that's Mexican, Spanish, Cuban voodoo, right?
Mm-hmm.
My dad was taken down by a back of a donkey at a young man, he says he's 6, 7 years old, to the bottom somewhere in the Grand Canyon, and had some work done on him, and he calls them angels, and they rubbed his legs, and said, boom, he can walk. And when he said that, he looked at me, and I looked at him, and we both just looked at my legs, and I said, nothing's free. Now, with my personal life and my medical situation, I've had medical doctors tell me a few times that they don't understand. One doctor said, I don't know if this is ever medically documented. Okay, well, I had some things just come out of the blue when I got hurt at work, and things went wrong, and it was a nightmare. I've had 16 surgeries. I've died twice, and I wound up losing my legs. Well, as soon as that happened, my health came 100% back. All the blood work and everything that I've had since then, they don't understand that any illness or anything that was going on in my body is gone. And it was the instant that I lost my legs. And my dad and we both believe that, nothing's free. So I wonder, that's crazy stuff, but it's true, and when my dad was a young man, his best friend, dad was a Forest Service guy, park ranger in California, and they used to hunt with dogs. And when he told me the story, I was like, you guys hunt dogs at night? I was like, how do you do that? And he's like, well, we just let them go, and we wait and listen. And we listen, and we can tell when the lead dog is treating something, and then we go to it. But we do it at night. And I was just like, wow, that's crazy. And, being my dad and open and family and stuff, he tells me that when he was about 18 years old, they were doing that, and the dogs, they were running, and they couldn't catch whatever they were chasing. And he said they listened to it until morning was coming up, and dogs were over here, and the dogs are in front of them, the dogs are behind them, the dogs to the left, dogs to the right, and they can't catch them. They're still chasing. And he said they finally were coming at him. And that era of time when my dad, like I said, he's 83 now, and when he was 18, the technology of the time, the flashlights weren't very good, right? But he said flashlight had a freshy battery in it, was the best that you could get back in the day. And as the crashes and tumbles come through, they put the lights on something, and for years he called it Bigfoot. That it was dark black, 8 feet tall, running upright, and hauling butt. But the one thing for years, and I just recently told him this last year, and it's because of technology. He always said, but it had a muzzle. It had a muzzle. I don't know, but Bigfoot, because he says he's seen him too. And I showed him Jake, and he's like, oh yeah, bingo, that's real. But he said this thing had a muzzle. Well, again, Martin Groves, amen to that guy. His Dogman story, I told him my dad, and he just was floored. You know, he doesn't listen to podcasts. He doesn't run a computer. He's 83. He's doing his thing, you know. And when I told him that, he was just like, wow. He's like, yes, that was that. But he called it Bigfoot, you know. But then he was confused because when he saw the Jake one, it didn't have a muzzle. It didn't look like that, you know. But that thing that he saw was a Dogman, you know. And my dad's got a few stories too, and that's kind of what I say, where his stories, me and now my daughters, they've both had missing time and some things go on with them.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, it definitely has gone down through the family tree 100%. Miguel, you have, I mean, your story is so amazing to hear the whole thing together, what you've lived through and what you've learned, and thank you for sharing it with us. I mean, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. It feels like we might be able to have another conversation someday. I'm sure you have maybe even more things to share once you think about it. But I want to make sure that everything that you wanted to share in this conversation, that you were able to share it.
I mean, yes, for the most part, yeah. I mean, the biggest thing that I can say is thank you for having the opportunity for a safe place for people to spit this stuff out, because I feel like a weight has been lifted right now, my man. I'm just, I just feel so much lighter saying this stuff. And I've said it to my friends and whatnot, but to put it out there on a larger scale and to be able to maybe have my story help others connect their dots, like the stories have helped me collect my dots. And amen to Martin Groves, man. That guy saved my life, period. And I just sincerely would hope that he knows that there's a person in this world that has gone back to Jesus Christ 100% because of his story and the way he always just says that he's there to help and God bless and whatnot. And then also validated not just my story, but my dad's, and it's helped us kind of heal and helped us maybe get to, not to the bottom of something, but just the therapy of being able to spit it out and know that there's other people in the world that have instances and things. And, you know, thankfully the technology has let us share, and your podcast has given us a platform to share. And I'm very grateful, and thank you very much for this. I very much so appreciate it. And, you know, I do have other stories, and they do involve Bigfoot again. And I know that I'm chatty Cathy. I'm that way because I've been stuck in this room with no legs for a while. But I just want to say, Jeremiah, thank you. And if you ever want to talk some more, I would be grateful to do so.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Every encounter we share reminds us that the world is bigger and stranger than we think, and that the truth is often hiding just beyond the tree line. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode, and share this with a friend who's into mysteries, monsters, or the unexplained. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please follow the show there and leave us a 5-star positive review, because all of that helps more people discover the show. And remember, if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot sighting, please, I'd love to hear from you. So email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's start the conversation. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, check out our membership community over at www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. And that's where you can hear tomorrow's episode today, early and ad-free, and members-only episodes every week. Also, it's a place to connect with other people that are into the Bigfoot subject as much as you are. Thanks again for following along with the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. And see you in the woods.